There's an old Hebrew blessing that says, "May you live in interesting times." I believe you would agree with me. We live in interesting times. We have the most divided political beliefs that we've personally ever seen. I understand in the mid-1800s it was worse. But we have mass shootings. We have wildland fires. We have earthquakes, hurricanes, and more. These are amazingly interesting times that we live in. But I want to bring your attention to one phenomenon that occurs frequently and absolutely blows my mind in a good way every time. Recently, when we've had fatal shootings, immediately the family is back in the media saying, "We forgive the shooter. We forgive someone who took the life of our loved one," the son. Typically it's the son. So I want to ask you to think about that. Could you do that quickly? Could you forgive the shooter? Would you forgive the shooter? Now, the great teacher, Jesus, taught we need to forgive 70 times 7. Buddhism, Hinduism absolutely agree. We need to forgive, lest we build up karma, and we'll consider it negative karma. We need to bear no grudge, so we don't create karma. But could you do that? Well, the real question then for yourself is, do I really believe in these teachings? Is that how I want to live? I once asked this group, if your religion became illegal, would there be enough evidence to convict you based on your following of your religion? When you are called for forgiveness, it's really one of those times when you get the chance to prove your commitment. You may have guessed the topic for today is about our need for forgiveness. There was an outline submitted through CSL by Reverend Dr. Peggy Price, who's a minister emeritus, so she's quite good, from Seal Beach, CSL, and a visiting minister at Kauai. So she obviously has life dialed in. Before I continue, I want to share a PowerPoint presentation. Just put it on the screen, maybe. The one that struck me the most was Catherine Ponder's. How you bind yourself to the person when you don't release them, when you don't forgive them. Is that something you really want to hold on to? From Global Heart Vision, I have a short quote. We envision a world in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or debts, is the norm. Forgiveness is the norm. That's what we want to focus on. Now I have another short quote from Oscar Wilde. This is one of my favorites. If you don't remember anything else about this talk today, remember this one about forgiveness. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. Anybody need me to repeat that? Got that one? Okay. Maybe that's not the spirit we want to maintain. But there's some powerful truth in there. And we talked about all the holidays in December. Most of those holidays include the practice of gift giving. So I encourage each one of you right now to give the gift of forgiveness, especially to yourself. Wrap it up, put it under your tree, or whatever it is you use to celebrate, and give yourself the gift of forgiveness. In Living the Science of Mind, Dr. Holmes has another short quote. It's impossible for us to have a sense of being forgiven while we condemn others. So he's basically saying we all need to receive forgiveness just as surely as we need to give forgiveness, because they're so intertwined. You can't withhold forgiveness from others and expect to be able to forgive yourself, because it's really harder for each one of us to forgive ourselves than anyone else. And yet, in Living the Science of Mind, Dr. Holmes says, we're all human beings, and we've all made mistakes. We all carry an unconscious burden of guilt, and we all need a sense of being forgiven. One of the most revealing things in the new science of mind is our need to feel that we are right with God, with life, and with each other. And it's with each other because we recognize we're all connected through Source, through the divine intelligence. There's no separation. We can't be connected to God and disconnected from each other. Now, remember, some of you will know this, there was a Bible story when the Pharisees brought a woman who'd been caught in adultery, for which the punishment is stoning, to Jesus. They wanted to set Jesus up, but they also wanted Jesus to judge her. And you remember what Jesus said? Jesus is the great master, the great teacher. Let he among you who is without sin cast the first stone. Okay, remember what happened? No stones came out of the crowd. We'll have a slightly different version for you. This is more of a Catholic version. So you remember the quote I just gave you? Well, in the Catholic version, when Jesus said, let he among you who is without sin cast the first stone, from the back of the crowd, a little pebble hit the lady in the back of the head. Jesus whipped around and he said, damn it, Mom, I told you, you don't count. So, forgiveness is hard. You've got to add some humor to it. Now here's a quote, I think from Dr. Holmes. I forgot to attribute this. Beyond this body and deeper than this mind, there's a perennial wellspring of life, which can flow through us to eternal givingness and to everlasting forgivingness. Sounds like Dr. Holmes, so I'll assume that's where I got it. Now, forgiveness is not about the other person. Like one of the slides says, it doesn't condone the action that caused us harm, but it serves us as a pathway to deeper compassion and love for ourselves and for the other person. In a book of Forgiving by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter Empho, I'm sorry, wherever his daughter is, I'm not pronouncing that right. He says, when a hurt or harm happens, we can choose to hurt back or to heal. If we choose to retaliate or pay back, the cycle of revenge and harm continues endlessly. But if we choose to forgive, we break the cycle and we can heal, renewing or releasing that relationship. Well, that's Bishop Tutu's words. More aligned with our teaching, we'd call that, we can break the cycle of karma. Remember karma? Karma is not punishment. It works for us. It works through us to teach us a lesson. Now, our teaching, Science of Mind, tells us we attract more of what we focus on. When we withhold forgiveness, we need to look at ourselves and say, why am I holding on to that? What can I learn? And what am I attracting by withholding forgiveness? There's an old Science of Mind cliche, maybe some of you heard this, what we resist persists. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says forgiveness is about healing suffering for ourselves and others. Until we develop compassion within ourselves and a concern about the welfare of others, we cannot truly forgive. There's an old saying that forgiveness is like longing for a better past. Sometimes we get stuck in the story and we live from the only if that happened that way story, that point of view. We have powerful mental abilities, but we rarely can change the past. So let's not live there. Let's live in the now. Look at your past experience. Determine whether it's from something you did or some other person did. And how can we stand in the light and grow from that action? Are you able to see that experience in the light where you actually get a gift of wisdom, insight, compassion, which allows you then to move forward and experience a grander vision of life? Or do you want to hang on to the old story? At the CSL in Rancho, in Las Vegas, where I grew up in this teaching, I was an old man when I went there, but just go with it. We had an amazing minister, Reverend Cynthia Clare, who's since left us. She was a tiny, petite woman who was powerful beyond measure in this failing, frail little body. And one Sunday that I will never forget, she was extremely candid on the platform. She was talking about forgiveness and why it prevents us from experiencing our own mental healing sometimes. She used an example I want to share with you. If you have ever seen or smelled a rotten potato, it's something you'll never forget. If you've had a bag of rotten potatoes, you will surely remember how that smelled as you carried it out to dispose of it somehow. It stinks terribly. She said, when we refuse to give forgiveness out of anger, stubbornness, indignity, or whatever, we begin to experience the rotten potato syndrome deep in our guts. It's like we carry, and we do it by choice, a sack of rotten potatoes around in our gut. She also said, and that was a pretty powerful image. People got the image. She also said many of us enjoy telling our story about how we got hurt, how we were injured, abused. And we have that story so embedded, so ingrained, we don't want to let go of the story. We get satisfaction out of continuing to play the victim. So much so that we're willing to hold on to the pain just so we can tell that story. She looked at a congregation of about 100 people, just slightly larger than ours. And she said, don't come to me for a healing unless you're willing to change your story. She said, I have worked with some of you repeatedly. You don't want a mental healing. You want to hold on to your story. If you want that sack of potatoes, enjoy your sack of rotten potatoes. But don't come to me, don't waste my time, unless you're willing to change your story. A lot of people in that room were shocked. She's a pretty candid lady, but that was not her normal style. She was challenging people. Give up your story. If you're not willing to stop being the victim, then enjoy being the victim. Live in your now, whatever it is. Be the best victim you can be. And then let it go. Let those potatoes go. Carrying the burden of unforgiveness is like dragging an old suitcase around with you. It just weighs you down. When you do give forgiveness, it lightens the load. It lightens who you are. You're not encumbered by the past. Even medical science has found a correlation between unforgiveness and health concerns. Documented. Forgiving is good for your health, and we'll talk more about that. The outline had this: shed a few pounds, then shed some grudges. You'll just feel better overall. I would suggest shed the grudges first and let the rest take care of itself. You'd be surprised the benefit to your health when you let go of the grudges. Also in the Book of Joy by Archbishop Tutu in his, this was a different book, by Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama got together and shared a book. Bishop Tutu shared with the Dalai Lama that in his childhood, his father was alcoholic, and every time he drank, he abused Bishop Tutu's mother. He remembered it clearly, and he was a small child, and he got mad at himself for not being able to protect his mother. He was mad at himself for not being able to tackle his father. He said, when his father was sober, he was a wonderful person. But he adored his mother. She was an incredible, gentle, wonderful human being. And that just made it worse for him when his father was beating her up. He went on to tell that at his father's death, he obviously had a lot of mixed emotions. And he felt regret that he'd never been able to experience closure with him about that issue of abuse, of alcoholism. And he carried that burden of guilt for years. And after listening to the Archbishop, the Dalai Lama sat quietly, and then he spoke. You spoke about how wonderful your father was when he was sober. It was only when he was drunk that these bad things happened. So it's the alcohol that's to blame, really. And this is the Dalai Lama. So I think he is a very, very kind person. And when he's drunk, he's not the real person. The Archbishop got tears in his eyes, and he turned to the Dalai Lama and he said, "Thank you." The Dalai Lama put it in perspective. And it's all the things we've already talked about. His father was a good person. He had a problem, which made him act in a different way. But the real person deserved forgiveness. Mahatma Gandhi says, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. I like it. Now, some of you may recall a story I've told before. I was carrying a grudge for, about 30 years against a former fiance. and I didn't understand why she cheated on me while we were engaged. Then in my process of developing my consciousness, one night in a lucid dream, when I was clearly in contact with my guides, I asked about that. I said, I'm still angry about that. Why did she do that? And I was pretty much told, you need to let that go. She gave you a great gift. And I was like, excuse me? How is that a gift? And I was told, because in a previous life, you were married and you cheated on her. She agreed to come into this lifetime and play this role with you so you would learn the lesson. Even in my lucid dream, I understood, oh, that changes things. So my next question was, does that mean we will continue this karmic cycle? Next life, we have a relationship and I cheat on her again? And it said, yes, unless you release that grudge, you forgive her, and more importantly, you thank her. And I said, how do I do that? She's in Pennsylvania, I'm in Reno, Nevada. I don't even have a clue where she lives. He said, no, come on, grow up. Your higher self can have a meeting with her higher self, and you thank her for what she did. And that's what we did. It wasn't all in one night. That was a series of a couple dream events, but it was absolutely as real as this dream event that we're experiencing together right now. And I know, I can feel the difference. There's no grudge, there's no anger, there's no animosity. I absolutely bless that experience and move on. The great philosopher of our time, Oprah, says, true forgiveness is when you can say, thank you for that experience. And I hope you can see in my story that I just painfully shared with you. Remember I said I'm not good at that one? Okay, I'm getting better. I can absolutely thank her for that experience. So that's what I was able to do, obviously with help from a higher source, which raises the obvious question. How can we tell when something which we can't forget, we don't want to forgive, could possibly have been from a karmic experience? My easy answer to that is, I don't know, and probably neither do you. So anytime you have this, you have to look at it as possibly for your benefit. You have to release the grudge, the anger, before it harms you more than it harmed the other person who helped you with that experience. Now let's get real. I've said you're all on your path of ascension. So we've heard all these things. Catherine Ponder's thing. If we don't forgive, we tie ourselves to that other person. Let's think about that. We know we're matter. We are energy. Our energy will lock into that other person until we release it consciously, energetically. Randy and Rana have talked repeatedly about clearing our energy fields. Once you release that grudge, once you give that forgiveness, you still have work to do. You need to clear your energy field. We are blessed here with several energetic healers. We have events coming up. Wednesday night we have Michelle who will be here. In January, we have Marilee who will be here. They're all energetic healers. I'm not sure this afternoon, I don't think she's really doing any healing stuff, but we have energy healers. Find them, use them. There's another one sitting right there. So, once you've gotten to forgiveness, don't forget the rest of it. These healers can look at your aura and go, yeah, you didn't quite clear that out. Maybe you need to keep doing a little more work. So forgiveness equals freedom. It's a process. And it may take many efforts. Remember, Jesus said, forgive 70 times 7. Interesting, numbers of wholeness, meaning we continue to forgive until we feel whole again. So where do you feel you're carrying any resentment? Start by being willing to forgive. In science of mind, we know intention is powerful. State your intention, I forgive. Take some time in your daily practice to let go of negative emotions. Slowly, gently, you will set yourself free. So, here's a final quick little affirmation. If there's any condemnation or animosity in me, I gladly release it. I release it and let it go as I turn to that silent presence within me, which gives all and withholds nothing. Namaste.